Now I'd like to turn to Phil Edholm for our series on NMRA clubs and divisions. The NMRA sponsors this for us, so I'd like to run their video first.
I hate to say this, Jim, but I don't think we have that video, so we'll just run. Oh, here we go.
Welcome to model railroading. And as much fun as model railroading already is, there is one way you can make it even more fun and get even more out of it. And that's by becoming a member of the National Model Railroad Association, the world's largest model railroading organization. The NMRA is devoted to the development, promotion, and enjoyment of the hobby. In fact, the NMRA has been setting industry standards for model railroading for over 80 years. From standardizing track gauges and coupler heights in the early days, right up to defining the specifications for today's digital layout command control systems, the NMRA has always been at the forefront of advances in the hobby, establishing conformity and compatibility among model railroading products. Not many other hobbies can say that. The NMRA has 18 worldwide regions, which include North America, Australia and New Zealand, Britain, and Europe. These regions have annual conventions where modelers can swap ideas, tour prototypical industries and railroads, see model railroad layouts built by other members, and get to know fellow modelers from a wide geographical area. And on a more local level, the NMRA has over 150 local divisions all across North America. These are groups of modelers in nearby cities and counties who get together regularly for scheduled events, seminars, how-to clinics, or visits to other members' layouts. Chances are there's a regular NMRA division event not very far from where you live. What it really comes down to is the fact that the NMRA is people just like you. Model railroaders sharing interests, knowledge, experience, and information with other modelers in their own community, in their own region, and across the country. It's the spirit of fellowship that makes the NMRA such an important part of the hobby for each of its members. Plus, the NMRA's national organization offers members the opportunity to travel to a major city for the annual national convention, where they can meet and learn from recognized experts in the hobby, see top-of-the-line model railroad layouts, tour rail-served industries and famous railroad locations, and even purchase the newest hobby merchandise at the world-class National Train Show. Add a subscription to the monthly NMRA magazine to your membership, and you'll get the latest model railroading news, along with helpful construction articles and stories of what other NMRA members around the country are doing. Your membership in the National Model Railroad Association gives you access to some of the most innovative people in the hobby, who can help you create your vision of a model railroad, who can help you learn new techniques and information one-on-one. By taking part in the NMRA's Achievement Program, you can grow your skills as a model railroader, advancing through the steps that lead to achieving Master Model Railroader certification. And with the fellowship of other modelers in your local division and region, you can share knowledge and accomplishments. The NMRA is people. The NMRA is local, regional, and national activities. The NMRA is one of the world's largest railroad libraries. Its online archives, liability and collection insurance, even discounts. In short, the NMRA is the best way to get more out of your hobby. By joining the National Model Railroad Association, you'll get a first-class ticket to the most enjoyment you can get out of model railroading. The NMRA, we make it more fun.
And now I'd like to turn to Phil Edholm, who unfortunately isn't here with us tonight. So Phil did an interview, and we got it on tape. So I'd like to play that video for you tonight of Phil Edholm and his interview of a division superintendent. Phil?
Thanks, Jim. This evening, we actually have this pre-recorded because unfortunately I have a business trip I had to be on. But I've actually chosen someone I think is very interesting who happens to be local to me, to talk about how local mentoring can be integrated with the AP program from the NMRA. So I'm very excited to do is introduce you to Earl Girbovan. But before I have him talk about the AP program, Earl just recently received his MMR. He went through the process and in that process built some pretty amazing models. So I thought I'd let him describe a few of those and talk to you about kind of the modeling he did to get his MMR. So Earl, this is Earl Girbovan.
Thanks, Phil. So as Phil mentioned, I just received my MMR about 6 months ago, and it was kind of a long process for me. When I started it, I really wasn't going for an MMR. I was just building structures and things that I enjoy doing. And then over time, kind of got more and more into the modeling, into the AP program, and then into the MMR certification. This structure in the upper left, this rock crusher, was actually the first big structure I did, and this is for a friend's layout. This was supposed to be, a 2 or 3 evening project, and it ended up to be about a year and a half, pretty much scratch building it to match a local prototype. And similarly, the lower right corner was another structure here in the San Francisco Bay Area that we were modeling. And then some of the other rolling stock are things that I did for my MMR rolling stock certificate. So on the next slide, again, some models I've scratch built. The caboose in the lower right was from pictures I took when I visited the Nevada Northern Railroad, and actually was engineer for a day, and this poor forlorn caboose was sitting outside, and I couldn't help but model it. One of the other things I've been interested in is technology and computer programming along with model railroading. And the lower left is an automated ore loader that was in Buffalo, New York at the turn of the century. So there's 6 different loaders unloading from a ship into rail cars. Each of those has a separate Arduino controlling it, and it's all scratch built, 3D printed, a lot of different things rolled into that model.
Oh, that's pretty amazing, Earl. I always find your modeling to be both amazing and inspirational.
I appreciate that.
Well, thanks. It's great. It's really good. So, one of the reasons I wanted to have you talk was you're doing a lot to encourage, AP participation and have people involved. So what are the kinds of things you've been doing out here in, the Coast Division and in the PCR in the Pacific Coast region in terms of really encouraging AP participation and using it as a modeling tool?
So we've been doing a number of things. One of the other local MMRs and I have been going out and doing judging at people's home. With COVID, we haven't been having the get-togethers that we normally do. So we've been going out judging and kind of motivating people and helping them along with what they need to do. Prior to that, we've been doing a lot of clinics, both live clinics and virtual clinics since we've had COVID, and been doing a lot of modeling clinics at conventions. It seems a lot of the conventions have moved more toward prototypes and not the hands-on modeling that we used to have. So we've been trying to put more of these hands-on clinics at the convention. Frank Markovic, one of the local MMRs, did that at the convention we had just last month. And in previous times, I've gone out and held Saturday small group clinics with about a dozen people where we do kind of a team build on scratch building, on weathering wood, on board construction, peeling paint, things like that. It's kind of a build along, the goal isn't to finish in an afternoon because you can't, but the goal is really to teach people some techniques so they're more comfortable trying to up their game on modeling.
I think that was very interesting. Frank at a clinic at the convention actually, gave away a weathering tool and taught people how to do weathering and go through a fairly in-depth process. So that was very good. So one of the things that's interesting is, there's kind of the formal definition of the AP program. Tell us a little bit about that, and then kind of what's your view of the AP program, having just gone through it. A lot of times when people talk about becoming an MMR, they may have done it 15 or 20 years ago or 30 years ago when the technology was different. As someone who clearly uses the technology, and how did you see the process going through it more recently?
Well, the MMR calls it a system for demonstrating superior skill level in the hobby. And I guess that's what it is. The program covers pretty much everything with building, operating, and service to the hobby. There's 11 different categories, and to get an MMR, you would need 7 of those categories. And if you go on the NMRA website, all the categories are spelled out with all the criteria, kind of everything you need to know to get it to get that category awarded. I kind of look at it as recognition for what you've done. The models that you saw in the beginning, that rock crusher and things like that, I don't build things, and you find that most people don't build models for the contest. They don't build them for the certificate. They build them because they want to build them, and they just do a good job, and they get it judged, and they just kind of roll into getting the certificate. And that's kind of the way I see it working. That's what they say, the journey, not the destination.
And that's interesting. So, how do you see that along that journey taking typically?
So I guess the question is, how long does it take to build a layout, huh? I don't know if I want to tell people how long on this call because they're going to run screaming the other direction. When I did it, I'm probably 10 plus years in getting my MMR. Now, before everybody gets scared away, I wasn't really ever planning on getting an MMR. It wasn't high on my priority list. But what I was doing is helping some of the local modelers with open houses, with op sessions and things like that. And guess what? That's volunteer points. And, I had a log of all those volunteer points. So I had those all queued up in the background. And it wasn't till 3 or 4 years before I got my MMR that I really thought about, gee, I want to get an MMR. So I'd say it probably took me about 3 focused years to get it done because I had to put together a home layout that I didn't have. I've been building structures for other people. Most of those models you saw are on other people's layouts. You've got to build, a lot of models and it takes time, and it takes time to do a good job. But some of the certificates that are in there, like author, volunteer, dispatcher, official, I look at those as background. You just do some clinics, do some articles, volunteer, be a judge, go to operating sessions, things like that. And you accumulate points for those kind of as in the background. Whereas the foreground, you're building models and you're doing your electrical and your civil certificates.
Cool. So one of the things I think you've done that I found to be very, very interesting and get a lot of positive feedback is really talking about the judging process. Because I think for a lot of people, it's kind of a voodoo thing. And I mean, you hear the anecdotal, well, this model was judged this way here and this way here. And I think maybe talking through a little bit how the process works would be appropriate. So can you spend just a couple of minutes talking about that? Because I think that's one of the things you've conveyed a lot locally that I think has been very helpful.
Sure. I'm also the local contest manager. I got roped into doing that by our departing president. So I've been doing that, and I've been helping in the contest room for quite some time now. So in judging, everybody's after this 87.5 points, this magic number. And some of the things I've read make it seem like it's godlike or almost unachievable. And it really isn't. We'll talk more about that later. But, for judging, the model is judged in 5 different categories. The big one is construction. It's how well you've done, the fit, the finish, do things line up? Are there gaps? Uh, I've seen really good models at a convention that were very complicated, looking great, but none of the roofs fit. So you have to do a good job on building it. The next category is conformity, how well it conforms to a prototype. And you don't have to build to a specific prototype. Obviously, it helps, but if you're conforming to prototype practices, that's good. Next category is detail. So this is the amount and the quality of detail that you're putting into whatever you're building. The next one is paint and finish. Obviously, how well you're painting, your decaling, your paint separation lines, your colors, your weathering, things like that. And the final category is scratch building. If you scratch built the model, or if you've got a kit built model and done some scratch build on it. So what happens during judging is there's a contest form that the entrant fills out, kind of talking about what he did in each of those steps. And usually it's good if you attach some photographs too of what you've done. The photographs help the judges to see what you've done, because again, we're trying to get this magic 87.5 points. And if you don't tell the poor judges what you've done, then they can't give you points. And that's where you see complaints about the paperwork. Gee, it takes me longer to write the paperwork than it does to do the model. Well, all we're trying to do is have you show that or explain to the judges what you've done so that they can give you the most points for the model. So when we judge in a contest, like at the nationals or the local meets, there's typically 3 judges for each of the categories, and they'll judge that category across all the models that are entered in the contest, and that's for consistency. You've got one judge that's experienced, that's done this before, and then you have 1 or 2 other judges with him that have varying levels of experience, and it's a good way to get new judges into the process so they're not kind of afraid, because it's scary at first about judging someone's model. I mean, not as scary as having your model judged, but it's scary to judge someone's model and make a mistake. But the good news is all this judging has matrices. The NMRA for all these categories have different matrices of the judging, and there's one up on the screen now. These matrices are all kind of the same. This one is for finish and detail. And you've got one axis, which is the complexity, and that's the y-axis over here on the left. And then another axis of how you've done. So what happens when you judge, we'll look at a model and we'll start looking at the complexity. And you got 2 or 3 judges, we're all looking at it going, well, I think he's maybe, a 17 on complexity. And then you start looking at appearance and, you look at complexity, we're looking, down here at about 17 or 18, and, the quality, he didn't do all that good. So going to move him back a little bit, maybe end up with like a score of 14. The yellow line is kind of the 87.5 point threshold. So you're looking at it and saying, is this model, of merit quality? And then obviously above. And, it gets almost kind of an exponential getting up to, like in this category, the full score of 25. It's really hard to be perfect, and you have to leave room in judging for someone that comes in with a scratch built cab forward with ungodly amount of detail and finish. So, people get a little upset about their scores sometimes, but I think that's part of the learning process. And the thing that we encourage people to do that are judging is on the back of the judging sheet, write a note. If you knocked off points for someone, explain why. Gee, your paint separation wasn't there, you had gaps, you didn't explain the work you did, you didn't explain the detail. And it helps the modeler to improve it. I've seen someone that has entered a model 2 or 3 times, fixing the mistakes that the judges gave him. and ended up with something really fantastic at the end.
So that's interesting. So I think that using the judging process as feedback to improve your models definitely is one way. What are some other ways that you talk to folks about, you know, modelers about how to improve their modeling and improve their scores in the AP if they really do decide they want to get that certificate?
Well, the first one, obviously, that we just talked about is be a judge. You know, you can see how the judges think. And, you know, once you're a judge, you kind of see what you need in a write-up. And that's really helpful. You know, the other advantage about being a judge is you get to see these models way up close because, you know, in the contest room, it's hands off the models. But, you know, with judging, we do let the senior judge be the one and only person that can pick up and move the model around and look at it. So it gives you a chance to really see some great models up front. You know, with COVID and everything, we haven't had the clinics that we used to have as much, but there's fantastic YouTube videos out there. There's a fellow named Jason Jensen, and he's on the NMRA turntable. You'll see it come out every once in a while with the videos that he does. And, you know, he kind of a George Celius take off a little bit with things being heavily weathered and decrepit. And it may not be your modeling style, but his techniques are fantastic. Also, there's a fellow named Luke Towen with the Boulder Creek Model Railroad, and he does a lot of laser cutting, a lot of dioramas, a lot of scenes. And both of these guys are really good teachers with that. So even if it's not your era, your railroad, they're worth watching. And don't forget, there's other YouTube videos from the military modelers, and I look at those all the time. There's some really great dioramas that people do out there, kind of a step-by-step. And the other thing, again, with COVID now, is there's more of these build-alongs. And I know Nutrax has some videos and some build-alongs. And these are great because a kit, you pick a kit, everybody buys that kit at a discount from the manufacturer. And then it's kind of an evening session where, you know, you build a certain amount of it every evening, people build it together, and you can look at each other's work, critique it, and really improve your skills with that. Along with that, you know, building a craftsman kit is really a good way of building your skills. Some of these craftsman kits are a course in model building and diorama construction. The kits by Sierra West, South River Model Works, and of course, Fine Scale Miniatures are fantastic. And yeah, I know the kits are expensive. They're all, you know, $200 plus, $300 plus dollars. You can get started with Bar Mills, Foss, Casey Workshop, a lot of other manufacturers for kits that maybe aren't so expensive, but teach the same techniques. All the Craftsman Kit websites have videos, have forums, have things like that. There's the Railroad Line Forum. There's magazines, you know, a lot of different ways to improve your skills. The best thing is just dig in and do it. Just get a kit and start working on it.
Cool. Well, you know, I think that we kind of covered a lot of things, but, you know, there's kind of another question we had, which was how much, I think you kind of covered this, so just kind of briefly, how much does where you start impact where you end up with in a score for a model? So, you know, how much does, you know, choosing between a fine scale miniature kit and the a much more simple, say, you know, a simple Banta kit, how much does that impact the potential outcome?
Yeah, so you got to pick the right kit. I mean, you get just a simple little four-wall passenger station and you do a fantastic job, and you're probably not going to get merit on the kit. The kit has to have a certain amount of complexity. So picking the right kit at the start really is critical. Looking at the models in the contest, talking to local MMRs. I've gone out and judged people's models knowing that they're not going to get merit awards. Actually, kind of both knew, but showing him what he could have done with interior detailing, with scratch building, with lighting, with things like that, you can elevate a model so that you can get, that merit level. And again, that merit level is not some, Herculean effort. It's very doable. Just pick a good kit and do a good job building it.
Oh, good. So, one of the comments that I think you often hear is that, if you've built a reasonable layout, like a 20 by 15, HO layout, you probably have done most everything you need to become an MMR. And I think talk just a moment about, that journey. As someone I don't think who has a huge personal layout and still got an MMR. So I think, it's probably an interesting commentary on how those skills come by building a layout.
Yeah, I just have a small switching layout at home, and I didn't have enough track on my switching layout to get my civil certificate, so I did some work at a friend's layout. So, I think the program is set up that if you build any kind of a reasonable sized layout, even almost a 4x8, you have enough complexity, enough things going on to get the certificates, to get mechanical, electrical, and the scenery. And then you're just adding structures, building some rolling stock. And that gets you, like 4 or 5 of the 7 certificates you need right there for an MMR. And then you need the service to the hobby. So that's the volunteer or the author or things like that. And those are the ones that I mentioned at the beginning. They're the kind of background efforts. And that by the time you get all your track work down, your electrical, your DCC running, and your locomotives, everything going, all those other certificates kind of happen and you're there.
But just document as you go. Well, really appreciate it, Earl, for taking the time. And, any kind of closing thoughts as to how, the APA program and contests can be used by, divisions and regions to really improve the modeling experience.
Well, again, I think of it as kind of recognition for what you've done. And the program is really there, I think, to help you build your skills, with the judging, with the contests. I don't want to belabor that, but I mean, you see other people's models, you see what people are doing. And, most of the work that you would be doing for an MMR, if that's what you decide to do, you'd be doing anyways. The only thing that I did that I wouldn't have done probably is build 1 or 2 of those pieces of rolling stock, because that's frankly not my thing. But, I had a good time doing it and have some really little models I'm really happy with. You're not alone in getting this done. There's a saying about if you talk to a military modeler and ask him how he did something, he's not going to tell you because he's afraid you're going to do something better than him next time around. If you ask a model railroader how he did something, be ready to get an hour or 2 dissertation on everything he did, the whole learning process. And I think that most model railroaders are really helpful with people to bring up everyone's skills. And with the whole AP program, it's good to push yourself a little bit. You're probably going to do more than you would have otherwise, but I'll tell you, you'll end up with something that's better modeled than what you thought that you'd be proud of, and you'd be really happy with the outcome.
Well, that's great, Earl. And I know you're clearly happy with the outcome. And, even that little car that you built that you didn't want to build came out amazing. So thanks again. And we'll look forward to talking with all of you next week. Thanks, Earl.
Thank
Well, and Phil, thank you so much for doing that interview with Earl. I thought that was really interesting. I think he touched many of the parts about how most people feel, or many people feel, let me put it that way, about the achievement program.